Anytime you are, sir.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you'd all join me, stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, everyone. First item of business is going to be the approval of the board minutes. I would look for a motion.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, that's passed. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda, Ms. Tabitha?
We do. We have removed the public health report.
Okay, public health report will be stricken. And if that's all,
Yep.
I would look for a motion to approve the
So moved.
agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Our next item is the sheriff. Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, Sheriff.
Got a sheriff's report for us this morning?
I do.
Morning, Sheriff.
Morning. So it sounds like I need to ask a lot of questions to Mr. Wincher today.
Yeah, you do.
So good morning. So this is going to be January's monthly report. And before I start, I just want to say that today we have Samantha Jarvis. It's her official first day. She's our new administrative support specialist. So she'll be sitting outside in the bubble where Linda Strand used to sit. So just a new face, and if you have a chance, stop in and greet her and tell her hi.
Very good.
Just to share a few photos, the first photo that I have is the Morrison County Sheriff's Squad Car. We changed our design for 2018. Wanted something different, I guess, so this is what we came up with. You can see we have the thin blue line that actually runs all the way around the entire squad car except for the front. Just like, again, something different, and it kind of catches the eye. So if you see that design, that's our new design. And of course, the older squad cars will remain the same until it becomes a rotation, which every year we usually rotate 4 or more squad cars.
Yep. Looks nice.
Thank you. The picture under that, as you guys are well aware, our dispatch group received an award of excellence in the month of January, which I feel was well-deserved. They do a good job, and the award was serving the agency with compassion and professionalism, as well as doing all this during the technology changes as well as our staffing changes. So just wanted to highlight and point that out as well. Moving along, I actually brought in Jason McDonald, who just stepped in the door. I'm going to briefly kind of go through this report fairly fast, and then I want Jason to kind of talk and update the board as far as what's going on in our community as far as drugs go. Because if you're like me, hey, Sheriff, what's going on? What are you doing about it? And I think it's good that Jason's able to highlight kind of what the task force is seeing and what are we doing about things. So we're going to have Jason come and talk here after I scroll through this fairly fast. So our number of complaints received during the month, you'll see we had a total of 918. 80 of those cases were criminal and 45 cases cleared. And I kind of looked into that, and a lot of the cases, some of our cases involve theft that are either currently A, up at the county attorney's office being reviewed for potential charges, or B, we're still actively investigating them. That's why the caseloads that have been cleared is fairly low. Moving on, we'll do drug investigations last. You'll see our 2-year comparison. It's a chart if you keep scrolling down. And basically, the total number of complaints did go up from January 2018 when we compare it to January 2017. Our criminal complaints went down just a handful. Our non-criminal complaints went up. Civil process papers went up. Some people are just having issues paying bills this time of the year. So really, when you look into our civil process and we try and figure out what's the root cause, a lot of it is just summons and complaints that are being issued out. So like credit card holders They're basically saying, hey, you owe us money, you're behind on payment, so our summons and complaints civil process papers have gone up significantly. Our drug investigations have gone up, and our total number of inmates went down just a little bit. So for January 2018, if we look at the pie chart, which is criminal complaint ICRs,
Right here?
you'll see there was 80 total. And versus going through every single one, I'll just highlight two of the larger amount of numbers that we're dealing with, and that's theft, which is the green quadrant. If you looked at it, if you visualize this as a clock, it'd be the 8 o'clock position where it says 14%. We had 11 thefts. And to break that down, we had 3 of them from a building/yard. It's categorized together. We had a theft from a person, 3 gas drive-offs, 3 thefts from a vehicle, and then 1 identity theft. And then just above that, you'll see fraud, which is purple, labeled at 16%, the 9 o'clock position. And all those are going to be scams. And as everyone's aware, scams continue to be a problem, not only here in Morrison County, but throughout the entire state of Minnesota and throughout our nation. So that's where we're at there. If you scroll down to the next slide, it's 273 traffic citations. You'll see the bottom portion, the blue, 66% of those were verbal warnings. So the breakdown there is 180 verbal warnings. On the top, the dark blue, 6%, there was 16 citations actually issued out for speed. And then we have written a few administrative citations. That's going to be the 7%, the blue pie shape there. I'm sorry, the purple, 7%, and that's going to be 18 administrative citations. So with that, when we write an administrative citation, and these have been primarily for speed, it has to be 9 miles an hour or under. And a lot of times we get complaints from cities. Recently, we got a complaint from the city of Uppsala. People are driving too fast. Continues to be like an ongoing basis. So we'll go out there and we'll do a lot of traffic control, and if these people maybe have been warned once, then we're giving them an administrative citation. If they've been warned multiple times, then they're getting a state citation. So kind of depending on their history and what's in our records management system.
And Sheriff, the state citation versus the county citation or administrative citation, obviously it's financially, I'm guessing, one costs more than the other?
Yeah, the state administration ticket is probably double.
Okay.
And then, of course, the fees are dispersed accordingly as well. The administrative citation, all the fees come back to the county. The state citation, they break it down to what city was it in, library fees,
Okay.
and many other fees have to be broke down as well. If we move down to our jail incidents, you'll see the total number of inmates for Morrison County. We've averaged 55 through the month of January. Our total inmate population, we averaged 66. So with all the outside counties that have been coming in, our average went up to 62 is what we averaged for January. And then the only thing else I'll highlight on the following page is our out-of-county inmates. We had 15, which we held for other counties through the month of January, and we brought in revenue of $11,055. Are there any questions on that?
I just have one comment that I would like to ask or talk about, Sheriff, and that's pay to stay. I know we've talked about this in the past, but I wonder if, as I looked at this month, as I went through it, if you will,
Yep.
and I see the total amount billed was $13,000, and the total amount collected was $4,500, and I realize not everybody can pay. I got it. But going to jail is not a free card any longer, hasn't been for a number of years. I just would like you to comment on that a little bit, if you could, please.
So what it is, pay to stay, I believe they're supposed to pay $20 a day to stay at our fine correctional facility. Some people pay that fee. Some people have hard times, issues paying that fee. So right after, usually about 20 to 30 days, if the fees aren't paid up, this gets turned over to collections. Well, what collections does is usually they're going to bring a judgment against you. we all know that a judgment equals bad credit usually equals no loans. So that's kind of how the system works, and it's usually every month we're kind of seeing figures like this. I don't see it where people are always paying up, but it does follow them, and it turns into a judgment and collections.
Very good. Thank you, Sheriff.
Yep. The only thing I'll point out is with our drug activity, we have been busy. We remain busy in the community. We're assisting with community forums. We still have Coffee with a Cop. We're doing outreach like we've never done before with churches, with the schools, with our senior centers. So I've emphasized this at past meetings that, usually it's always been enforcement, a little bit of education. I can honestly say we're doing a lot more education than what we've ever done in the past. So with that, I kind of want to give everybody kind of a synopsis of what's going on in our county, what we're seeing, and what we're actually doing. So I brought in Jason McDonald. Jason's an investigator with us. He's assigned to the Central Minnesota Drug and Gang Task Force, and maybe he can give us a little bit of what's going on with the opioid, heroin issues, and methamphetamine, what we're seeing here locally.
Morning, Jason.
Morning. Thanks for giving me a few minutes here. I'll try not to take too much of your time. As you look at the drug investigations, one of the things that kind of stands out is you'll see that the majority of them are controlled substance agency assists. Central Minnesota Violent Offender Task Force last year went to our own records management system, and so now I don't create a Morrison County, I don't draw a number for Morrison County for the investigation because Central Minnesota Violent Offender Task Force is its own law enforcement agency now. So I have my own records management system. So anytime we're doing an active investigation in Morrison County, it actually becomes an agency assist for Morrison because that's just a way for us to track the numbers with Morrison County. What we're seeing right now is Central Minnesota Task Force, as you're aware, covers Morrison, Todd, Benton, Stearns, Sherburne County, City of St. Cloud. So that gives us a pretty huge area that we're covering. We have a lot of new investigators. 4 of our investigators have less than a few months of experience on right now. So that's kind of drawn me down into the St. Cloud and Stearns County area a little bit more to help fill in till those guys got their feet underneath them and got them running. But overall, Central Minnesota area has been extremely busy for the last few months. In fact, probably the last year has been the busiest I've ever seen it. And we're running from investigation to investigation to investigation. We got numerous bigger cases going at this time, besides following up on the smaller complaints, user and complaints. Probably the biggest narcotic or drug that we're seeing right now is methamphetamine. It's everywhere, and when I'm talking quantities, I'm talking pounds of methamphetamine that we're seeing in central Minnesota. When I first started on the task force, just going back over 3 years ago, we were buying gram quantities of methamphetamine for the most part. At this point, it's not uncommon for us to be buying an ounce of methamphetamine at a time with a street value anywhere from $800 to $1,000 or better at a crack. That's just, there's such a supply of it that we're able to make those purchases in those amounts. A lot of our bigger cases we're dealing with pounds of methamphetamine. We're still seeing heroin. Heroin is still an issue, especially in the Little Falls area. But what we're seeing up here is more of a user end market where we don't have a lot of large-scale dealers up here. What we have is a lot of people that are using. They're driving to the Metro or St. Cloud almost on a daily basis, picking up heroin. The cost down there is substantially cheaper. If you drive to the cities, you can get it for anywhere from $100 to $150 a gram, which is enough for them for a day or so. But if you bring that gram up to Little Falls, you can part that out into 0.1 grams and sell that for up to $40 for 0.1 gram, $200 for a half gram. So they come up here, they use what they need, they sell what they have left over to make enough money to go back and purchase more. Marijuana, we're still seeing marijuana's prevalent. We haven't done a lot of large-scale investigations into that just because the heroin and methamphetamine really is what's driving us at this point. Cocaine is starting to make a resurgence, and we've been seeing cocaine pop up in Morrison County more than we have in the past. A lot of our investigations have been down in the St. Cloud area, but the people that we're investigating down there, these are people that are, it's making its way up to Morrison County. We're trying to head it off in the metro area or the St. Cloud area before it's actually getting up to Morrison County. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Like I said, with the new guys, they're coming along really well, and they're anxious because they're new, so they're really pushing our investigations and stuff. So we've been remaining extremely busy. That's kind of what we're seeing up here, though. But I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys have as regards to drug investigations or drug trade up here.
Gentlemen? I'll bite Jason.
Okay.
I very clearly heard you say St. Cloud and the metro area, but really, where is that meth coming from?
Mexico. Most of the majority of our methamphetamine that you're seeing in Minnesota is produced in Mexico. It's smuggled across the U.S. border. Most of the stuff we see, in fact, I'd say the majority of it comes from the West Coast, comes up into California, and a lot of it goes up into Washington, where it comes across on the I-90 and I-94 corridor. And load cars bringing anywhere from a pound to 100 pounds coming across and being dropped off, and a lot of that's dropped off right in central Minnesota before it gets to cities.
The reason I asked that question is a number of years ago, and I know you're very well aware of this, both of you are very well aware of this, is that there was meth houses.
Yes.
And we had our share here in Morrison County. Do we see that very often? I'm certainly not going to say it's not being done. Do we see that very often anymore?
We're not seeing the large-scale meth labs that you would have seen prior to 2006, 2005, before the Methamphetamine Epidemic Act went into place. What you're seeing now is the one-pot cooks, which they've learned a method mostly online and YouTube and whatnot. But I've responded to 3 meth labs over the last year, and all those have been one-pot meth labs where they're making a smaller quantity, but they're mixing all the chemicals into one pot. It's actually a little bit more dangerous. The fire and explosion rate is pretty significant for that method. So that's what we're seeing now, and that's mostly guys that still like the old school fluff methamphetamine, a little bit wetter product. But it's pretty rare because you can buy the Mexican meth so much cheaper.
And the heroin and the coke, where's that coming from?
Also coming up through Mexico, the route of delivery into the U.S. is a little bit different, though. Heroin comes up mostly through Chicago, distributed by street gangs in Chicago that have ties up into Minneapolis. It gets up into Minneapolis and then comes up into St. Cloud, and a lot of it traffic. Highway 10's a huge corridor for getting it up to the reservations up north as well.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, and this is, it hits home, especially I was talking to one of the troopers. Within the last week and a half, there was just a traffic stop up by Motley. So when we mentioned Highway 10 being one of the major corridors, I mean, it's perception's reality. I mean, he's making the stop, took a pound of methamphetamine off the street. So it's happening, and it continues to happen. So we want to make sure that we continue to not only assist other agencies within the Central Minnesota Drug and Gang Task Force, but we're also getting assistance from them, and that's why it's such a huge asset and a resource to have.
Absolutely.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for your time,
Thank you.
Commissioners. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
I guess that's all I have, unless there's anything for me.
That's probably enough, Sheriff. Thank you.
I was going to say the county administrator is looking better every day, but
There we go.
this isn't recorded.
Amy's sitting in for Deb today. All righty. Social Services, Child Protection. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
And for the sake of everyone else besides us, if we just let us know who we all are.
Yes, I'm Melanie Erickson, Supervisor for Child and Family Services Unit, and with me is Katie Canettle. She's our lead social worker in the Child and Family Unit. And then Kari O'Leary is Assistant County Attorney with Morrison County Attorney's Office.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning.
This morning, I'm kind of combining our traditional child protection report that we typically do in early April, combining that with some out-of-home placement numbers related to the drug use issue that we've talked about with the board for, I think, a number of months. And so I kind of pulled that all together into kind of a modified report this morning. I usually start out with the child protection intakes and comparing them to our total intakes. Our intakes overall are increasing, and I think that in large part is due to also our min choices that we're also having right now, which is a disability service. So the overall blue line of intakes is up, but in addition to that, we have an increase in child protection intakes as well. I think some of that is due to community awareness, that there's been a large push in the media, I think, because of the child protection issues the last couple of years throughout the state. And also our office traditionally has done quite a bit of work in the community to encourage those child protection calls or reports to be made. And Morrison County has a way of inviting those reports rather than deterring those, and so I think we also see that as a factor. The next slide shows our child protection assessments. We're kind of leveling off a bit from our big steep increase we had in 2015 and again in 2016, and that was reflective, I think, of that law change. And then also there's been continuing adjustments to the child protection screening criteria, and one of those new adjustments is that new allegations, which we used to account as a new assessment, now gets folded into an existing assessment. And so I think that has a part of that leveling off of numbers, as well as just we are leveling off a bit, which would be a good thing. The next slide, this is information that you've had before. I just wanted to highlight that again. Some of those increases that we've seen are because, like I said, of the community awareness. And now registered predatory offenders are, when they have a child that is a new assessment, even if we've assessed them previously, if they have another child, then we do another assessment. So for every child they have is another assessment. The same is for previous terminated parents, or if there's been an involuntary transfer of custody, every new child that parent has, male or female, will generate a new assessment. Regardless of how long it's been, there will be a new assessment, and they will be traditional investigations. Again, there's been a broadening of the screening criteria to include I think a greater ability for us to act early into situations. And again, we have an increased drug with methamphetamine and heroin prescription drugs in the community. Again, generally too, there's an expectation for us to do more outreach and voluntary services. The next slide just shows our assessments and how they are done as far as the difference between a family assessment and family investigation, and then a facility investigation. A facility investigation is any maltreatment allegation that happens in a licensed child care facility, a daycare home, or a child foster care situation. Family investigation are those high-level cases, which would be a sexual abuse allegation, predatory offender, extreme abuse, that would be a shaken baby or broken bones, things of that nature. Extreme, also drug cases. In our methamphetamine, heroin assessments, sometimes they're family investigations, although most of the time we're handling those in family assessments. We still do a large number of family assessments, which is considered, we have more of a time frame to work that assessment. We have more options to include kind of a family meeting, or we may choose to do a traditional interview. It just gives us a little more flexibility. We continue to do a lot of family assessments. I know some counties have decreased that, but really we work with our county attorney's office as well, so whether or not we call it a family assessment or a family investigation is neither here nor there. If we need to get in court and do a placement, we do. And so whether or not whatever assessment method we use doesn't seem to really impact that too much. The next slide shows our types of allegations, and this is really on trend and really isn't much different than it's been in previous years. Sexual abuse stays pretty steady. Physical abuse and neglect has increased a bit over the past several years, I would say, just due to, again, those drug situations, which usually ends up being a neglect situation. One of the things that the state measures us on is our timeliness to first contact with victims. And with family assessments, we have 120 hours, and family investigations and facility investigations, we have 24 hours to make that contact with family. Now, there's just recently been a change for us that has just been implemented, which isn't included on these numbers, which is from the very time of the intake call, they're going to change that 24 hours. So it used to be that our timeliness of first contact was counted from the time that we screened in a report to the, we had 24 hours, say, to start that investigation. Now it's going to be from the time the intake is received. So they've really accelerated that. So we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with that in the next.
So, excuse me, in respect to that, at 11 o'clock tonight, there's going to be a 911 call placed, and it's going to be a neglect call. That's when the clock starts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so that will be the difference versus when, like, we would screen this morning, we would have screened.
Yeah.
That would be the difference. And really, if you look at our numbers and our responsiveness, we're really kind of acting like that anyway. I mean, we have a really good team at Morrison County. We have a tight team from intake to our assessment and screening team members. As soon as something comes in that looks like it might be immediate response, the intake worker is notifying us. The sheriff's office is very good at notifying. The supervisor's on call on the weekends. And so we, for a large part, we're not going to sit on our heels when we have a sexual abuse situation and the child's going home. We're not going to sit on our heels and wait for that to happen anyway. We're going to act. And you can see by our numbers, we're out in 5 and 4 hours in those really dangerous situations. So in reality, I'm not that concerned about how that sounds. It'll just be making sure we don't have any kind of hitches in our system of communication. So I'm very confident in our team that we can do that and create safety in those situations and get our assessment going. The next slide just talks about for family investigations. So those serious allegations, 64% of the time we are determining maltreatment. So those cases are serious, and we are most of the time finding that there's been a situation that we are determining that event did in fact happen. So the next slide just shows a trend in that, like I had mentioned, there's more of a push to offer child welfare services, and traditionally we've worked together well with our law enforcement, had done sexual abuse assessment assistance to law enforcement, so cases we haven't necessarily had to be a part of, but we work together with them, and then sometimes we offer services to victims. But on top of that, we've had a greater push for mandated services for pregnant mothers that are testing positive, anything from marijuana to heroin to methamphetamine. When we get those reports, they come in as a child protection report now, according to the screening guidelines change, and then we are mandated to offer a child welfare assessment, and we continue to make those contacts until that the mother is connected with treatment, or we may refer for commitment if she continues to test positive and denies services. So we've seen that's really doubled our work, I think, in child welfare assessment work, and that's also done by our family assessment staff, investigation staff, and our assessment workers. The next slide shows kind of a trend that we were trying to capture, because what we're noticing in assessments, and Katie's noticed this quite a bit, is that she gets an assessment and then she's writing a court petition or a or a termination petition, where you used to just complete an assessment. Now we're noticing that because of that predatory registered offenders or the previous terminations, that when it comes into assessment, we're having to take immediate court action almost. And when those assessments come in, we either have to make the decision to file a CHIPS petition or file that termination of parental rights in both of those situations. So we consult with our county attorney's office in determining which is the best method to take in those situations. And that, of course, depends on a number of factors. Also, we're noticing, we have for years, you see that great dip in 2014, and we were doing a lot of work back then to work on family arrangements, and that is to keep families out of court for as long as we could and help families really work with our case managers and assessment workers in order to keep the children safe, so that grandma and grandpa might take care of the child, and they'd agree to do that while we worked a case plan. And what we're seeing that has started to happen is, despite all of that work, we haven't been able to deter very many CHIPS petitions at this point. Some of those family arrangements are successful, but the degree of severity of methamphetamine or heroin use is such that it's hard to kick. And so we don't just let families linger in that situation. Either the family needs to go in and file for custody on their own, which we have a few of those that happen, or maybe the non-custodial parent will do so, or we will give so long of a time period, usually around 60 to 90 days, for them to get into treatment and get active. Otherwise, we will file that CHIPS petition and take custody, because kids need permanency. They just cannot linger like that, just hanging out in grandparents' home, and mom or dad could come pick up the child at any point in time. So despite our efforts to continue that practice, we have continued to see our CHIPS petitions in court in time rise. In the next slide, we're just looking at our total placement numbers of children. I think this is the highest number of kids in placement in the time that I've been with Morrison County. I can't go back to the really early years, but, we had done so much work to drive down this number, and just the situations are too dangerous with the current situations with the drug use and with the previous termination of parental rights, or with the registered predatory offenders, and all of these situations are combining so that we have a lot of children in care right now.
Melanie, without a doubt, the world has changed, and we all know that. Mm-hmm. But you would say that the vast majority of the 2017 numbers here are drug-related?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and you'll see that in our slides coming up, but definitely that is the case, yes. So, we look at the number of children in placement. This kind of dissects that. And, placement's hard because it's a moving target, so I usually have to kind of pick a time frame. And so I just took a snapshot as of December 31st, 2017. Who are all the kids in placement, and where they line up as to why they're in placement. So 51 are in placement because of child protection. 30 are state wards. That means we've terminated their parental rights and they're available for adoption. They were terminated through the child protection system. So essentially you can look at the 30 and the 51 coming out of child protection. In addition to the relative arrangements, so that's still relative arrangements that we have, those kids are not involved in court, so it's kind of a misnomer to say they're in placement, but we need to track those kids because they are away from their parents, and we have an open case, and they could turn into a placement at any point in time. In fact, I'm quite certain some of those kids have at 8 at this point. And then that 18 to 21-year-old youth also came out of our child protection system. So we have 90 kids that are, as a result of child protection, that are in placement, are away from their parents. And then we have 13 that are in placement just simply because of their mental health issue or a developmental disability issue. And then 5 for truancy.
Can you comment for just a moment on the state wards? Mm-hmm. What do those 30 range in age?
From infants, probably, I think, let's see, our oldest state ward. 17, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And they're currently, today, they would be living in foster care?
Yes.
I assume, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, we have a few that are in residential treatment periodically because of the trauma that they've experienced. They are not included in those mental health numbers. They are included in the state ward numbers. Sometimes they need a stint of a residential treatment for 6 to 9 months in order to help get them ready for adoption. But by and large, they are in foster care.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to do just a snapshot of our child protection placements, again, trying to pick a point in time. I did have a slide from last year, February 2017, which is historical. This is a graph that I showed you last year. And then I did one for January of 2018. And so the green is included in the blue number. So that is to say, those 6 kids are included in those 11, okay? So 5 of the kids had drug-related placements in 1 to 6 months, and 6 had other reasons for placement in February 2017. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We just couldn't get those graphs to work right, as awesome as Teresa is. And also, one of the things that I track is how long does it take cases to get through permanency. State law says that at 6 months, really, we should be making a decision in court about permanency. That is, are we returning the child home? Are we filing a termination of parental rights? Are we going to transfer custody? Because it is not good for kids to stay in foster care. And when you are a child, 6 months seems like a long time. If you remember what it felt like in the beginning of December to wait for Christmas, it felt like forever, or a summer vacation seemed like it went on and on and on. It's a much different time period than it is for us as adults. And so when we're getting into 12 into 18 months to be in foster care, it becomes a very long time for them. And if you look at our January numbers of 2018, we know we still have those numbers kind of persisting, but you will notice that almost all of those are drug-related at this point. We have 15 kids right now that are past the 6 months time frame, which is about 60% of our kids are past that 6 months that are residing in foster care. So, we were seeing all of this come together, I guess, as a staff, particularly Katie in her lead worker role, and we decided to kind of do a little bit of a data study, that is to dig a little further, because sometimes you can get caught in a certain case or two and that colors your perception, so we really wanted to dig down and look at that, and Katie put a lot of time into digging into our cases over a 2-year period. She did interviews with staff and put a lot of time into gathering the following data that I can put together here for you. So we had 136 kids that were involved in placement during this time of January 1st, 2016 to 12/31/2017. We were kind of tracking our court time. We had 5 other petitions that we were doing in court, and cases that were in court that didn't involve placement, that needed services or protection, that took time within the court. And then we had 20 termination of parental rights petitions that were due to a predatory registered offender. We weren't doing placement in those situations because the other parent was protecting the child. And so even though we were in court and writing a termination petition and using that court time and that staff time, the child was not in placement. The child was safe. But we had 111 children that were in court with a petition, or we had a case for safety, and the placement was either ordered or they had a family arrangement that was ordered. So 111 kids that were away from their parents.
And generally speaking, I shouldn't say generally speaking, what are we considering a child?
Infant to up to age 18.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Of the status of those 111 children, on the next graph, I have a little pie chart to show, and I just did a snapshot as of 12/31 where these kids were at. So of those 111 kids, on the last day of December 31st, 2017, where were the kids at? 4 had aged out of foster care. We had some transfer of custodies, 18 were reunified. We have 28 still in placement, 41 termination of parental rights. Now, just think what that means. And part of what when I see that number, I think, okay, for all of those parents, when they have another child, there will be another termination of parental rights petition, possibly another placement. So the work is compounding, and I think that's part of what we're seeing. It's, it's kind of growing. Besides the drug issue, there are other issues that are compounding to increase our court time, increase our placements. On the next slide, the other trend we're seeing is that we just have a lot of chemical dependency issues. 106 of the children were impacted, their placement or their return home or the prevention of returning home were impacted by a chemical dependency issue. And 5 had other issues, namely mental health. But chemical dependency, what do I mean? I'm not talking about drinking. I'm not even talking about really testing positive for marijuana, because we can safety plan around those things. What we can't safety plan around is heroin and methamphetamine and those other opioids. Particularly, we're seeing a combination of drugs, I think, using many drugs. Heroin and methamphetamine at the same time, testing positive for one than the other. So the concern with the permanency decisions too is that time in foster care and being permanently away from your parent is a traumatic event for kids. It does impact these kids greatly. It's a difficult thing to explain to them. It's a difficult thing for them to comprehend. So, probably keeping that in mind too as we look at these numbers. 75 of our children, of these 111 children, did have a permanency decision, either a transfer of custody to a relative or a non-custodial parent, with 41 termination of parental rights. And then, like I said, 18 were reunified. So of those kids that were reunified, 78% of those parents accessed treatment without delay. That is to say that once we got involved and we got into placement, they did what they needed to do to access treatment. And we did have 22% that did delay treatment, but still were successful in getting their children reunified with them. But to me, that 78% that speaks largely to that, being engaged in treatment, being willing to make that serious decision to make an adjustment in your lifestyle. Of our children on the next slide that are continuing in foster care, those 28 children, a concerning number to us is that 80% of those parents have delayed treatment now. And so for one reason or another, either they couldn't get in, they won't complete the paperwork, they won't sign releases, they're delaying that treatment. So that has me greatly concerned. 20% did access treatment without delay. One of the factors that we're also paying attention to is that a judge has the capacity to either at 6 months allow us to file for permanency, that is to make a permanent decision, or not. And if they decide not to, or sometimes we will, to as a staff decide to apply for an extension, that is to extend foster care past the 6 months. Sometimes a judge will say, well, we'll give them 60 more days, 90 more days, sometimes 6 months. Sometimes there's extensions and more extensions too, depending on how things are going. There's a lot of factors that lead into that, but one of the things that we're paying attention to is that when there is no court extension, you can see that we are getting to permanency pretty quickly. We have a couple that we did not ask for an extension, but we did reunify, 2 aged out. But when we are getting an extension, that is going past the 6 months into 12, 18, 24 months of foster care, we still are getting a termination or permanency order in 53% of those cases. Unfortunately, 26% still are in placement of those ones that are in that court extension. The next slide just kind of captures, because what we've talked about a lot at various times, especially last year at budget time, is what's going on with our budget. And this is kind of what's going on with our budget. When a case is involved in placement, and right now 70% of our current placements, right before I did this report, I took account of our child protection cases, and 70% of them involve placement. The staff time that compared to the average child protection case with no placement, which when I started back in the day, that's what they were. By and large, most of them were. That's a pretty average child protection case. That case that I pulled randomly, where staff are worried about that child, there are mental health issues. It's a serious case. It's not a non-serious case. But the average child protection placement case, you can see the amount of time it takes, because the expectations for us as an agency and what we're expected to do as far as create no barriers for either parent, find every parent involved in that situation. Sometimes there's multiple parents. Coordinating sibling visits if they're not placed together. Coordinating visits with each parent. Sometimes coordinating visit with grandparents or extended family. Looking for permanency homes, that is for searching for relatives. Court time, court report time. The children have multiple needs in those situations, medical, sometimes needing OT or PT, mental health issues, coordinating rides. There's just a lot to coordinate for these kids in care, and so that's why that time is so great. Of course, our staff costs I calculated just using our SEGR rate, which is our state rate, which includes all, agency time. And then our purchase of services is what I really also probably noticed the most, is that court really does, and that's been made clear, I think, in several situations where the court has said to us, you will continue to provide gas cards, you will continue to provide, even though we're in an extension, and maybe the parent hasn't cooperated with treatment, but we are expected to assist with whatever barriers might be to that person getting access to visits or treatment or anything like that. So might be paying for some medical costs, might be paying for supervised visits, rides, food cards, just about anything at this point.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So would it be fair to say you add that 31,395 and the 56,469 together, and that's what a average child protection placement case costs?
That would be an estimation, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I just pulled an average case.
Right.
An average placement case. That case involves a couple of children, so, there'll be some that would cost less and some that would cost more, but yeah.
I think that we also have to keep in mind that the rules have changed just a little bit to take one of your lines from back in the day till today.
Yeah.
The rules have changed.
Yes.
To where, we just got done talking about, as soon as the call comes in, your clock starts ticking, to all the other services that are now, I don't want to say recommended, demanded, or needed to be in place, or that are in place that we have to follow through with. I think that the rules changing, if you will, I don't mean to say caring more, because that's not it, spending more time per case.
Right, and I
has just
think,
done this to us.
there's been multiple law changes that require us to provide more services. I would not say that those are bad things.
No, and I'm not suggesting.
They are all good things, yes. But there is, the longer that that child resides in placement, the more complicated things get, is also what I would say. I guess it concerns me that the longer a child's in placement, the more damage it does to the child, and the more services they're going to need overall. So, I mean, that's that hard balance, and that the court and Kari helps us, navigate. Is that's a serious thing to do a termination of parental rights, and so the law holds a very high bar to cross, and so that's why all those services and demonstration of those efforts are needed. At the same time, it's very hard to have a child linger in foster care, and that's why those, I don't know how many years it's been now, 10 maybe, that, permanency laws came into effect, I think, that kids used to just stay in foster care an unlimited amount of time.
Sure.
And so, thank goodness we don't have those days anymore.
Absolutely.
Yes. So those last slides, I just wanted to do a capture of a cost, as our costs increase. This does include corrections costs, corrections placements, which my other slides did not. This is this total budget line item you'll see when social services hands in their budget. And then on the last slide, these are just social service placements. And they include the other costs that I approve, which is on that those purchase services. So right now, when I look at a placement budget, I calculate in my mind those purchase services that we have to purchase, all those extras in addition to the placement, because we wouldn't be purchasing those services at that level if it wasn't for the placement cost, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I just want to commend you for I don't think people understand the work you folks go through to make this all work. There's nothing, it's good to talk about that we're doing something for the kids, but it's bad that we have to do this. So I don't know how you do your job every day. It's tough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I can't speak high enough of our staff. They are very committed. They work really hard, and I don't know what I'd do without Katie, frankly. And our work with County Attorney's Office is probably, we're very fortunate, I think, when you talk with other counties throughout the state, to work that closely and that well. So that really assists us as well. We appreciate that.
Takes special people to do a special job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you, too. It's alarming to see the increase from 2013 till 2017. And it's hard to believe that parents choose something else instead of taking care of their children. And we're grateful for all of you in your office that are stepping up to take care of the children. Thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right. And moving right along, our next item that we're services.
I am going to cover for Brad today.
Contract approval.
Yes. Okay. The contract approval is for a contract with Divine House, and to provide basic living skills, and it is already budgeted. It's just an additional provider to provide this service for the agency.
Also move, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this one? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. And are you going to take care of the next one, too?
Yes, I am.
Policy?
Okay, this is the fuel card policy that Jim worked very hard to address. As I had mentioned in my earlier report about the gas cards and all of that, social workers are spending a lot of time running to and fro to get those, and Jim really wanted a better way to document those costs for the auditor, as well as save staff time. And so the policy that he developed does require my approval, and does require me to decide, what grant area or county dollars we are spending every time we get a fuel card. And so we have a way to track that. but it does allow us, I think, to save some staff time in pre-purchasing those fuel cards.
Okay, I would look for a motion.
Also move, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion. I think it should be noted that Jim and Brad both were here during our planning meeting a week ago, and in depth, we talked about on how this would work and how much better staff time, et cetera, that it would take to implement this. So this is nothing more than a positive move. It's not spending any more, it's not spending any less, but I think it's spending less as far as staff time is concerned and making the wheel just turn a little bit smoother.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it definitely saves a substantial amount of staff time and costs with that. Yes, it is the same funds that we would be expending otherwise.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, this money is going to clients
Yes,
for gas cards, not social service
Yep.
for gas
Yes.
cards.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
that's correct.
Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? This motion passes. And I think there's one more item.
Yes. That is the request to fill a staff vacancy that we will have because we have an eligibility worker that is retiring. I believe that Brad brought this to the planning board also. We did discuss that we get 50% reimbursement on our staff for the eligibility worker team, and that our caseloads when we had done a local study were among the highest already locally, and so if we did not fill this position, we would be way off the charts. So we're hoping to be able to fill this vacancy of this retirement.
I would look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion, a second. Further discussion? I think it should be noted that we also beat this up pretty well in planning, and as you just said, it needs to be replaced.
And how much our caseworkers?
Yes, absolutely.
State average per client.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a 324 cases per worker right now
Yeah.
with this position filled.
Yes, so,
And the average is 210 to 310, so in our area.
you bet. Further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Melanie, thank you very kindly.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Melanie.
And I believe our next item on the agenda is Emily was here, and extension.
Good morning, Emily.
Good morning, Emily.
Do have some items for you, so if you could take one of each of these.
Thank you. I will.
All right, well, good morning, Commissioners. So you have a couple handouts coming your way. Just one is an event, one is some information that I believe you have already received, but we're just trying to continue to get the word out. So first, the full-page flyer, that is for the financial counseling that Extension statewide is offering. It is free and confidential. And simply, anybody who would like that, so it's financial counseling for farmers in the state, they just need to call our farm information line, which is a 1-800 toll-free number Extension provides. And it's completely confidential. Again, it's free. And then those seeking the counseling will be matched with one of the counselors that Extension has put together. So a lot of these people are retired bankers, retired farm business management instructors, people of that nature that know about farm financials and can hopefully help some of these farms. So it's just really for those that are feeling a lot of serious financial distress and aren't quite sure where to turn. And so that's what this service is doing. And I believe the plan right now is to have it go for 2 years. So it started, I believe, kind of around this summer, fall time is when they first launched the program. And again, just a simple call to the farm information line will get them set up with someone geographically that makes sense. And so I would just ask that you spread the word. Feel free to distribute the flyer that I gave you. If you would like more flyers, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to send you more. It's sadly very tough right now for a lot of farmers out there, and a lot of it is tied to financials and just the tough economic times. And so this is just one way that Extension is trying to help and providing something that's a free service for these people who are struggling to make ends meet. And are trying to find a way to continue farming, because for some farmers, unfortunately, the only answer is to sell the farm, and even then, that doesn't always necessarily put them in the best financial state if they do have to liquidate. So on that same kind of task, I guess, also there are big concerns across the nation really with mental health in rural areas and specifically among the agricultural community. Extension did a program this past January in Albany where we addressed some mental health stuff. We had Ted Matthews there. He is a rural mental health specialist with the Minnesota Department of Ag. He has been very busy lately, so we were glad we could get him. We also had some other speakers, including Sandy Hansen-Wolf, who has had to overcome some adversity in the owning of her agricultural business, which is a feed and seed company out of Watkins. And then we also had some farmer panels there as well that included farmers who talked about the decision to sell the farm. So this was specifically for dairy farmers, so those that chose to sell their cows. And then we also heard from some farmers there as well, talking about, how do you grit through and how do you make some of those decisions to try to make your farm legacy last. And so this issue of mental health is not going away. It, of course, is incredibly difficult for, I think, anybody in the population to talk about, but especially among farmers. It's a really uncomfortable topic for them, and it's really too bad because we're seeing farmer suicide rates at an all-time high, so there are a lot of people that are suffering in silence. Extension is trying to do what they can. They're also supporting Department of Agriculture programs involved in this, so the Department of Agriculture recently launched a new 24-hour helpline, and what's different from this helpline from the previous ones they've had is they actually get connected to a health services organization in the cities with certified mental health counselors. So their hope there is that, again, that's free and confidential. The only thing they need to know is a name that they should call the person by. So if farmers aren't even comfortable giving their real name, they don't have to. And their hope there is just that you may feel more comfortable talking about your mental health with somebody who doesn't even know you. So you don't have to worry about seeing them at the grocery store and some sort of uncomfortable confrontation there. So that's their hope with that. And then locally, efforts that we're making. So we did that one program. We are looking at how we can continue to open up this conversation about mental health. I try to talk about it on some of my radio clips and in my articles that I put out as well. And then later this week, I'm going to a program called Down on the Farm. So it's something that Minnesota Department of Agriculture put together these sessions. They're being held all over the state. The target audience is people who work with farmers, so agricultural lenders, extension educators, nutritionists, crop consultants, etc. And their hope is to kind of give those people, so people like me, a toolbox of just resources and skills, hopefully, that we can use when we're out in the field and to provide support to farmers and maybe recognize some of those warning signs of poor mental health. And I actually was asked by a member of the Benton County Extension Committee if I would kind of prepare a summary of that and perhaps provide some tips on what people like you, the commissioners or the Extension Committee can do if they're out and talking with neighbors and providing what is called mental health first aid. And so my plan is to, after attending this workshop on Thursday, to put together a little bit of a summary, make a report, and I do plan to not just pass along to Benton County, but to Morrison and Stearns County as well. So I'd ask that you keep an eye out for that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
have you had any thought about putting on something for the feedlot officers in those counties? We have feedlot officers that inspect those sites, and of course that can be an extremely stressful time for a feedlot producer. Maybe some tools in the toolbox could be educating some of that staff on how to recognize some of those mental illness and or dangerous situations, because we certainly can that can escalate very quickly. So that might be something worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. In preparing to kind of go to this workshop, I have been talking with Nathan Winter, my supervisor, about, how can we kind of roll out what I'm learning to more people. And I think that's a great idea and one I hadn't thought about yet. But we're really thinking of who else is on farms, and yes, I'm on farms, but there are lots of people that are on farms more often than I am, and so we're trying to think how we can reach as many of those people as possible. So thank you. I will take note of that and let my supervisor know. Are there any other questions on that before I move on?
Yes, I do. This would be a good brochure to have, like with the feed officers and also veterinarians and stuff that go to the farm every day, because they're the ones that are dealing with this issue, and it's pretty bad out there with the prices that farmers are getting and what the crops have been the last couple years. So, but putting it in the hands of the people that work with them is a real good idea. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And yeah, we've been making every effort to kind of get these out and get the information out to as many people as possible. So thank you for that. So switching gears a little bit onto some other programming. So you also should have gotten one of these trifold brochures. So this is a program I'm really excited about in an effort to continue to diversify my offerings. No doubt dairy and beef are very important in the Tri-County area that I cover, but there are more livestock than just that. And lately, and I know I've been telling you this probably ever since I got here, which has been almost 5 years ago now, I do get quite a few questions on backyard chickens and kind of the small flock poultry. So I have been working with Wayne Martin, who is our alternative livestock educator in Extension, and I had talked to him in the fall about doing some sort of a small flock backyard poultry workshop. And so he actually worked with some vets, was able to get some grant funding to put this workshop together. And as you can see in the brochure, it's actually going to be offered at 5 different locations around the state. So they've been able to kind of turn it into a statewide program, which is great. And you can see that there is going to be one in St. Cloud on March 10th. And so this program is really for people who are wanting to just get started or are just getting started now. So you can see kind of on that proposed agenda, things we'll be covering, things from breeds to regulatory issues, biosecurity, raising baby chicks, all sorts of things. So we're really hoping to provide some people with some good introductory knowledge. And then the plan is to, and I believe it's written into the grant, that this group, it's a group of poultry veterinarians actually who are going to be doing the speaking at this, is to come back in a few months' time and do kind of a follow-up workshop that would be some more advanced information. So for those that are already established in backyard or small flock poultry, to learn a little bit more about some of the more advanced care and nutrition things and that, because there's only so much you can get into one day. And so we are hoping to have it kind of be a 2-parter. So more to come with that in the coming months. So yes, again, March 10th, there's a small cost associated. I believe it's $10 a person. Just because we're providing lunch and that it is an all-day workshop. So if you know anybody who's interested in this topic, thinking about it, please be sure to let them know. And again, if you would like more of these brochures, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to get more into your hands. Only other thing, I know Commissioners Winter and Jelinski already know that, but we are going to be having another extension intern this summer. So we're doing it a little bit differently than last summer. Instead of one kind of egg and hort intern in Stearns, Benton, Morrison, there's actually going to be one that does just Stearns, Benton, and then there's going to be one that does Morrison and Todd County. And that individual will hopefully emphasize a little bit more on the local foods and the small farms. That person will also, help me with my Dairy Field Day and help Brenda Miller with the Todd County Dairy Field Day. But we're really hoping to get some more local foods and small farms work done in Morrison and Todd County with that individual. So applications are rolling in. I believe we're planning to interview next week for that. So you can stay tuned. We had a great intern last summer, and I think we'll get another great one for this summer as well. So that is all that I have for right now. If anybody has any questions or additional comments.
Questions, concerns, comments? Sounds like you did a good job, Emily. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very
for your time,
much.
Commissioners.
Miss Amy, I think that you're on now.
I am up.
And I don't think you have to move. You can stay where you are.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'm going to present to you the Land Services Report. I just have, one item and then a meeting date request for you.
Okay.
But what I've got is to consider the rezone for multiple parcels of land from shoreline residential to shoreline commercial for for the purpose of compliance with the zoning ordinance and for future development of the camp, per recommendation of the Morrison County Planning Commission on January 22nd, 2018. If you recall, this is Camp Lebanon, and this was heard at the Planning Commission, recommended for approval. I'll just add that the other rezone request requested to waive the right for a decision, and you'll hear that one at a later date.
Okay. I would look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? And hearing no further discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the only other item I've got is I need to set a date for the County Board of Equalization, of Appeal and Equalization. And so, because we've got to get our tax statements out. And so I am looking at the evening of June 12th at 5 p.m. here at the City Hall. June 12th. Will that work?
I think it'll work with me.
Yep, it'll work with me.
5 p.m.
Yep, June 12th, 5 p.m. here at City Hall.
And that's for what again?
And that is for the Board of Appeal and Equalization.
At what time?
5 o'clock.
Beautiful. Excellent.
All right.
It shall be.
Thank you, that's all I have.
All righty. And then I think Miss Tabitha is going to do our auditor treasurer report today.
I am. I just have a request here to approve the Minnesota Fishing Museum to hold 2 fundraising events. Fall Ballroom on March 3rd and April 20th. That includes pull tabs and a raffle on each day.
I'd look for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Our next item, we
Do you have the cash
don't have another cash report, so it
It was included in the packet.
was,
Reviewed,
and it
yep.
was, and reviewed, and I don't think we need any action on that, do we? No, we do not. And then we have Mr. Bukowski.
Warrants.
Excuse me. Sorry, I missed it. Got to pay the bills.
I'll move to pay the bills.
Second.
And this is a roll call vote. Commissioner Lemire?
Aye.
Wincher?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? And myself is an aye. Motion passes. And now, we have Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I have 2 items for your consideration today that was included in your packet. The first is the 2018 distribution to the townships from the town road account. We are showing that the townships, and they've certified to us 951.64 miles, were maintained at least 8 months out of the year on the township road system. We're using the 2016 population. There's a formula that we had that was adopted back in the 80s that has been maintained this long on how these funds are distributed. We received $625,757 for distribution to the townships, and the allotments are shown or in your packet. We also checked that the townships maintain a minimum tax rate going to the Road and Bridge Fund, and all of the townships meet those minimum requirements. And so the distribution is based on 50% population and 50% mileage. So our recommendation is that the board would authorize us to make the distribution.
I'd look for a motion.
So move.
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Then we have the Camp Ripley Veterans State Trail Cooperative Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I think it's probably close to 10 years that the Citizens Committee formed with the concept that they wanted to connect the trail system of the Stearns County, the Wobegon system, with the Paul Bunyan Trail system up in Crow Wing and Cass counties. That Citizens Committee has worked very hard, very diligently, and we're successful in getting a designation of the Camp Ripley Veterans State Trail through Morrison County, which is just to begin with a concept of a huge corridor to connect those trails together. Throughout this 10 years, though, individual work has been placed on different segments of the trail. And one of the first segments that is trying to be constructed and completed is the trail or the connection between the Sioux Line Trail, our Sioux Line Trail, to Little Falls. And that was broken into smaller segments in order to accomplish it. Earlier in the summer, the city had held a hearing on the segment between Lindbergh State Park and Mill Park. In October, the county board then held another informational meeting to take input on whether the concept of constructing the trail along that segment was feasible and what the public's input to that was. You heard that back at that point in time, and you instructed us to work with the DNR to develop an agreement to allow that to be constructed. This agreement is a culmination of our dealings with the DNR. What it will do is we'll allow that segment from Lindbergh State Park to Mill Park to be constructed within the right-of-way of County State Aid Highway 52. The plans are being designed, or are pretty much designed, by the engineering staff of the city of Little Falls and are under review both by the DNR and by our department. This agreement, though, is needed to allow it to be constructed in that right-of-way. And so what we're asking is that the board would adopt the resolution that's included in the packet, authorizing the agreement and directing the county board chairman and the administrator to execute it.
I would look for a motion.
So moved.
Got a motion
A second?
and a second. Further discussion? I would just like to say that I know that there has been all kinds of work that has been done by citizen committees in regards to this. In order to make that connection to what I've been told over and over and over is the world's largest trail, there's about 30 miles that have been neglected, if you will, or have been just forgotten about. And that portion of that 30 miles, in rough numbers, is the Camp Ripley Veterans State Trail, as we know it. And as you said, Steve, it needs to be broken down into pieces, or because it can't all be done at one time. It's not a cheap endeavor. And right now we've got the piece from Mill Park to Lindbergh Park on the table. Funding has been, and maybe you can comment just a little bit on funding has been secured, if you will, to take care of that. So there is no additional funding that we need to look for. That's been done by the legislature.
I think we would want to make clear that the construction of this segment of trail is all funded through bonding money that has been secured through the legislature, but also the maintenance of this trail is not a responsibility that the county is taking on. It is a state trail that stays with them. If the county does become involved in maintenance of the trail in the future, it will be by a separate agreement that lays out those terms and conditions and compensation if we were to become involved.
Further discussion?
Go
Go
ahead. Go ahead.
I know we talked earlier about them taking away our ability to do road construction on that without their blessing, have you? Did we get that straightened out?
I think we have it as straightened out as we're going to get it, in that we can make, we can do construction on County State Aid 52, but if the construction that we do affects the trail, we need to work with them on how it affects the trail. So we can do work on the road itself if it doesn't impact the trail, but if it does impact the trail, they do want to have the ability to review it and approve it. And I think that's something, because we're using bonding money, that they do need to have some control over that in order for that to happen, that we have to look at this as that kind of a joint effort.
Right, and the only thing the county did was give them the right of way. We're not building it. It's the DNR that's building it, and the DNR that's going to operate it, and the DNR that's going to upkeep it, correct?
I want to be clear with that because they may enter into an agreement with the city to do some of that work, but they're paying the cost of it.
Right.
So the engineering, they're paying the city to do the engineering, but Greg and his team are doing that
Saying our
work.
responsibility, though.
Yeah. The only way that would happen, Commissioner, is if you entered into some agreement to do that for them. And we could do that. We don't have an arrangement to do that at this point in time. But if you did, the way those are laid out is that they would compensate the county for doing the work. Sometimes in order to speed it up, get it done faster, they'll enter into agreements with local units to provide that work. But at this point in time, we are not providing any of those services.
And it's their trail.
It is their trail, correct?
Thank you.
Steve, could you explain to me a little bit when, I'm thinking, okay, this is county right away, and you have a ditch there and people are mowing the ditch in front of their place perhaps. How does that trail go through there? Is it in the road right away where there's two ditches now, or is it flat from the highway? Is that,
The segment that this is going to be constructed on is a curb and gutter. It's an urban section, so there isn't a ditch.
okay,
It is a curb and gutter section, and the design on the side of the trail is, currently we have a 12-foot driving lane and a 10-foot paved shoulder, and then you have the excess right-of-way. What the design concept is to maintain the 12-foot driving lane, take the 10-foot paved shoulder, and that will become a 4-foot paved shoulder. There'll be a 5-foot grass boulevard then behind the curb and gutter, and then the 10-foot trail fits in that outer edge of the right-of-way. And there's approximately 1 to 2 feet then that before you touch down at the edge of the right-of-way in the private property. So that the ditch issue is not a part of this segment because it's an urban section, but that's how it will fit in there. It all is still going to continue to typically drain the way it drains now, which would be towards the curb and gutter or away from it to whatever outlet it would follow.
okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
And then we look to administration for committee reports and scheduling and such.
This through February 25th.
Through March 10th.
February 25th.
February 25th. March 5. Commissioner Wilson, you going to start things off this morning?
I can. February 25th, I got an extension at 10 o'clock. I think that's in St. Cloud. And Planning Commission at 7 o'clock. On the 27th, got a planning session, 8:30 here. And then AMC Conference starts on the 27th and 28th. And March 1st. Then on the 2nd of March, we got that emergency meeting out at Camp Ripley, I think it is this year.
Oh, the EMS?
Yep. And TSWAC at 8:30 in the morning. And then on the 5th, they got Public Works Planning, Board of Adjustment on the 6th of February. And that looks like,
What day did you say the one in St. Cloud is? You said the 25th?
I got extension here at 10 o'clock on the 26th.
Oh, okay. I thought you
Is that right?
He did say, but that's okay.
I've got taxes here first. Oh, that's my own taxes. Okay. I was going to say, wait a minute.
Can we all
Okay,
come?
that's what I got, yep.
Commissioner Lemire?
The only thing different I have on the 27th is HRA at 1:30.
Okay.
And you got me.
Okay, and I got to take a look at mine, February 25th.
I have to ask, do we not have a board meeting or anything on February 6th on a Tuesday?
Yep, we do.
Yep.
Because I just said Board of Adjustment, that's all.
March 6th.
That's all I said. We have our
There's a
board
board
meeting too,
I was
correct?
going to ask when it got to
Yeah,
July.
because I don't have it on here, but I,
Yeah.
I planning to come.
I know. I'm going to be here.
On the 26th, I've got Stand Up For You at 5 o'clock. Safety planning, I don't know what that is, and I'm going to skip that, miss that. I think we missed that, got both of those. On the 7th of March, 10 o'clock in the morning, I've got a Central Minnesota Emergency Services Board Executive Committee meeting, and that's in the city of St. Cloud. On the 8th, I've got a 10 o'clock in the morning Legislative Conference Committee phone conference. That's held at my house. And I believe the 8th and 9th, now I'll skip that 10 o'clock one, because I'm going to be gone at a strategic planning
Okay.
meeting with ARMOR, the State Emergency Communications Board. I'm going to be somewhere in the cities on the 8th and the 9th.
So you're skipping that armor rack then on the 9th?
Yep, and I'm skipping that on the 9th, that's
Okay.
correct. And that should do it.
You don't have trails then that Thursday? You'll be gone? Or are you going to drive back and forth?
On the 8th?
Yeah.
No, I will not be there for trails.
Okay.
And that should do it.
And there isn't a public safety meeting Monday night.
I don't know.
where?
On the, yes, I do. I've got it on mine, too. I don't know if we've got one. I don't know where it would be held at. It will be held at the fire department in Little Falls, if it happens. That's at 6:30. And I haven't got any confirmation that it is happening as of yet. Anything further, gentlemen? I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Discussion? Didn't think so. Those in favor? Opposed? That motion passes. Thank you very much.
It's been a good day.